Andrew Eborn is here. He's a barrister and broadcaster. Andrew, lovely to have you.
Lovely to see you again.
Lovely
and wonderful to hear your listeners and viewers all around the world. Tenerife, come on.
I know, it's wonderful.
Glorious.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond, actually, we have a regular listener in Sydney as well. Let me see if I can find, he often texts in, Shane in Sydney says, yes, g'day, Peter. Merry Christmas, mate, to you and Jack, Jack's my cat, from Down Under, says Shane in Sydney.
He
so,
says, yes, good day.
Good day.
Is that right? Because he's Australian.
Because he's Australian.
Of course, that's what
he says, obviously. Yes, indeed. So, tell me what's happening in the papers. The Times, page 4, Sunak needs to get a grip.
Well, it's talk about deja vu, and what on earth do the French call deja vu? And it's all about strikes, the Sussexes, and
well, they'll know from the last time.
Exactly. So Sunak needs to get a grip. That's what the Times is leading on, and this is to do with the NHS and the strikes with nurses and so on and so forth, and the number of hospital appointments having to be cancelled as a result. And what's happening? They're talking about trafficking foreign nurses from Africa and Asia to come and fill in these jobs. The good news is, however, that it wasn't quite as bad as they thought out. They said that 15,779 appointments and operations were cancelled, but only about a tenth of the 100,000 nurses eligible to strike did so.
Interesting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, because it's something like 44 of the 200 nursing trusts, and not all of them, of course, are members of the Royal College of Nurses as well. It's first time in their 106-year history that they have actually been striking. But the strike's set to cost London something like £2 billion. Just the capital, say nothing of the rest of the country.
And that's right. That's dealing not just with retail, but also with, obviously, the hospitality industry. At a time when we need it the most.
Well, they've been hammered through the lockdowns as well. We spoke a lot on this programme about the hospitality industry and the fact that, first of all, a lot of workers left, and then people weren't allowed to go out, and then there was Eat Out to help out, but there were all sorts of restrictions, and then finally people could go out, and then the cost of living crisis comes in, and wages have to go up, and the price of energy and all the rest of it, and to say nothing of the fact that people have less money to actually go out.
No, you're absolutely right. And I always say, and people have got the right to strike, you've got the right to get a fair wage. We have to do the other side of the equation as well, though. You need to turn around and go, where's this money coming from? There is no magic money tree. And it's not the Grinch that stole Christmas, it's the Lynch that stole Christmas.
Well,
and
indeed.
You work on that sort of basis. What I love, though, Matt, who's always brilliant, it's a fantastic cartoon on the Telegraph talking about rail strikes. He says, I'm buying my wife a once-in-a-lifetime unique entertainment experience. It's a train journey.
That's brilliant.
Is what he
Absolutely
said.
Brilliant. He's a fantastic cartoonist. Actually, just speaking about travel, thanks to Dennis, who gave us a ring to say that if anybody is heading to Heathrow Airport, Terminals 2 or 3, it's currently taking over an hour to get into the airport. I presume that is by car, in terms of actually getting in there and getting away. I'm actually heading away myself on Thursday. So, I mean, the travel chaos has already started, Andrew, to say nothing of everything else that the strikes are dealing with as well.
No, it's really crazy, and this is the problem. People trying to get away for Christmas. We're talking about it this year. They were saying people might have to do a virtual Christmas.
Oh, well, I hope not, because that's kind of been the case for so many people over the past couple of years as well. But it's interesting that the Times is reporting as well that even the nation's spies are said to be amongst those feeling the pinch. Tell us about this.
Well, apparently what's happened is they're having to get food from food banks because the
spies.
Yes, absolutely. So within that sort of side, this is what
don't sort of imagine James Bond going to a food bank.
He probably doesn't. So shaken but not very particularly stirred. I think the reality is that it's affecting everybody. And what happens is, look, we do walk a mile in somebody else's moccasins. You can see the sort of difficulties that there are. So whilst we celebrate Christmas, there are those who are actually having a miserable time. In the same time, we saw wonderful weather and the white sort of gloriously snow-covered areas throughout the UK. There are people with burst pipes who are having misery at home with no electricity. So it's that sort of balance, I think, which we need to sort of understand. And it's been certainly a week where people have been trying to understand each other.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting you mentioned this because The Guardian has The Guardian has a guide to small talk around the time that Lady Susan Hussey and Ngozi Fulani, we had a lot of controversy, a lot of calls on this as well. This was Lady Susan Hussey, Baroness Susan Hussey, I think, who was who was talking to a woman at a Buckingham Palace meeting and asked her over and over again where she came from. But they've sort of made up, haven't they?
Well, I think, it's one of the wonderful stories of, and it's
actually, if you can see the photo, if you're looking on Talk TV now, and maybe you've seen this in the papers, even if you're listening on Talk Radio, they both look pretty relieved, I think, that this is over.
I think they totally are. And I think the reality is it's very, very sad when you sort of get these things which are taken by the press and I think escalated. Because Lady Hussey, and she was in fact, she's the widow of Marmaduke Hussey, who you might remember was chair of the BBC.
Yeah.
And he was furious, in fact, about the Diana interview about Bashir. He called it one of the darkest moments of his career at the BBC. But this is it's a good story because there's a good resolution. They've sat down together and worked out, look, hang about, we said sorry, it was misunderstanding and so on and so forth. But what it also shows is that Lady Hussey, Lady Susan Hussey, the lady in waiting, has been with the Queen for 60 years. And I actually say there are, two sides to every story. I think she was appallingly treated.
I agree. I think she should have been, this meeting should have been allowed to happen before she was asked to give up her role.
Absolutely. And also, and this is why I'm making the point about where do you come from and small talk, which is why I sort of reference about the whole sort of thing. This was a party where they go around and they make small talk. And I've had the real honour of meeting all sorts of royals in my time, wonderful. I think, with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who says all sorts of wonderful things.
Well, this is the thing. The Duke of Edinburgh didn't lose his role for many of the controversial things he said over the years. Were a heck of a lot worse than where are you from.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I always think that perception and reality are very rarely aligned. And I think before people rush to take offence, what they should try and work out is where people are coming from, without necessarily where you're coming from.
Well, indeed, yes.
I thank you. You can't say that anymore. But that's the reality. And I think it is great. It's a good resolution. It's good that we've got people sat down and saw some sort of resolution. But we need to look at that in the future. We need to, rather than rush to take offence, let's try and understand what is the intention when people are doing it. And making small talk at these events and going round to the individual people is very tricky. I'll tell you, when I met the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen was with him, and he always is the warm-up guy, was the warm-up guy for her. And it was in the wonderful Inns of Court in Middle Temple, where they first performed Twelfth Night. And the Queen, Her Majesty, was introduced to me, so this is Andrew Eborn.
Were you performing in Twelfth Night?
I'm permanently.
I'm shocked that you crept the boards, Andrew.
No, it's all very good. But she was introduced to me, said, "This is Andrew Eborn, he's a barrister and a magician." And she said, "Oh, how nice," and sort of walked on. And Prince Philip was given the same introduction to Andrew Eborn. He's a barrister and a magician. He's sort of really nice. And he took a couple of steps, and he took a couple of steps back and said, "I bet that's good for pulling the birds," he said.
Lovely.
So, absolutely, I said, and a few doves and a few pigeons and rabbits as well. But always those moments, they're trying to lighten the mood. And I think it's looking at that sort of stuff. There was no offence intended. And I think that's the good. It's good they've managed to sort it out.
It's good they've made up. We're going to talk more after the break about two other royals, Meghan and Harry, because the fallout from their Netflix series continues. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. Loads and loads and loads of people who've been in touch, including stuff. More from the pay-per-view, more from Andrew, coming up after the break. Andrew Eborn is with us still. Let's talk about Harry and Meghan, because briefly, because there are people saying we've talked about this a lot this week, but apparently, according to the Daily Express, hurt King seeks peace. And we're talking about Harry and Meghan coming to say, or not as the case maybe. We're talking about Harry and Meghan possibly coming to the Coronation.
Yes, and this is the royal household basically turning around and going back to the mantra that Disraeli introduced, that never complain, never explain. So the Revelations, the third 3 episodes that have dropped on Thursday. I've seen all of them now, all 6. And actually, it's not just a criticism about the family.
I'm halfway through number 5.
Oh,
does it get better?
I won't spoil it for you, because you're the same age as Harry, aren't you?
I am. I'm 38.
38. You see, always a thrill. What it is, and actually, they go in with an open mind, is what I would say to people. But it does sell the papers, and it's not so much. And this is what people are not really focusing on. It's not just about the internal fighting. All families have internal fighting. It's also about the relationship with the press and how that comes about. And they talk some pretty interesting stuff about Associated Newspapers and what happened there. And recollections will certainly vary.
Absolutely.
And you're going to see that. But what the king is saying is, no, absolutely, you must come to the coronation. I'm very hurt. You're my son, and so on and so forth. So I hope that they will be building those bridges. And I think that it's an interesting way of doing it. But do watch the series with an open mind.
I will. And someone who probably needs to build a few bridges as well is Elon Musk, who has banned a number of US journalists whose who've reported on him, but some of them have been reinstated. Is that correct?
Well, what's happened? So Musk, basically, he's kicked off a few of the journalists, and he's saying, I'm going to talk about hypocrisy. This is what people are saying about Harry. They're saying Elon Musk wants to be the champion of freedom of speech. He's kicked off some journalists, but he was saying it's for security reasons, because they were giving the location.
Is it though?
Well, they were tracking. What they were doing, and decide yourself, they were tracking his plane.
Right.
And so what he was saying, by giving away secret information...
I mean, you can track basically any plane.
Well, you can. Absolutely. But this is what he's saying, and that was the reason that he stopped it. Now, the EU has threatened Musk with this, because basically what they're saying is that under EU law, the Digital Services Act requires respect of media freedom and fundamental rights. And this is what they're saying. He could fall foul of that if he doesn't do that. But he's saying security reasons. They're saying freedom of the press and so on and so forth. But interesting time.
Perhaps some work to do there. If you're getting a last-minute Christmas present, I think I've now bought all my Christmas presents, and the last one I bought this morning was actually for Tech Up Dave, which I'll be giving him a bit later on the programme. But apparently, fake perfume, according to the Daily Star, is containing cyanide and urine.
Yes, it's all a glorious headline. They're always brilliant with the headlines. I always love a good pun. You know, it's got to be good. The sword is mightier than the pun, I think they say. Eau de toilette is the headline there. And what they're saying is there's pee in perfume.
Right.
And fake perfume, they're warning. There's about £60,000 of bogus beauty products with labels including Chanel, Armani, all the stuff that you wear, Peter.
Of course.
All got to be good.
But but a clothes horse.
Be careful if you buy it down the old dog and dagger, because it could not be the real stuff, and it might have such things as cyanide and human weed.
Cyanide?
Yeah.
I mean, that's... I mean, if
it's weird, isn't it?
It is a bit weird. Why not just put normal water in it? I mean, why cyanide? Why go to the bother of saying,
I guess
get me some urine?
Exactly. Passed by the management. It's got to be good. It is a very strange story, but you should be careful. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is.
The race for number one, the Christmas number one, is continuing. I'm afraid I know very little about pop music.
Yeah.
I used to be a young fogey, and now I'm just a fogey.
Yes.
But what are the tracks
well,
that are battling it out?
Well, there's all sorts of glorious tracks which are out there at the moment. Everybody is releasing a track. What I like at the moment is Ladbaby, who for the last 4 years has had the number one with variations of I Love Sausage Rolls as opposed to I Love Rock and Roll.
Brilliant.
He's done a cover version of Don't They Know It's Christmas.
Right.
And he's got lots of lookalikes in there, from Elton John to George Michael to Boy George and so on and so forth, recreating that moment. So I reckon the odds, he may well go for the 5 in a row, I think it is.
Yes.
But there's a few other people who've sort of got those. I think Basil Brush has got one out. You've got various people
Bring
from
back Mr. Bobby, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So always a thrill. But it's always a good this time of year. What I love about Ladbaby, it's raising money and awareness about food banks and so on and so forth.
Right, yeah.
And at a time when heating and eating is so critical, dealing with that sort of stuff, one of the charities I'm involved with is something called UK Harvest. And Camilla, what used to be the patron, she may still be, depending on trying to work out who does what at the moment. But what we're saying is trying to educate people about food waste. So we work with Jamie Oliver, for example, on the don't bin it, spin it, the whole wonky vegetables thing.
Yeah.
And raising money and awareness about that sort of side has got to be good.
Absolutely. Very, very important as well. Let's talk about a review of the year, because we're getting to this time of the year where we look back, really, around Christmas time, and often because, let's face it, the newspapers sometimes need to fill their pages as well with various things. And Hugo Rifkin in the Times is a very, very funny man. Very funny man. Has looked back in terms of all the politicians, Boris, Liz, Rishi, just the 3 people who've been Prime Minister this year as well. What's he saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Read us a few gems.
He has been absolutely brilliant, and it is in the Times magazine today. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be.
I see what it is.
I thank you. So he basically summarises the whole year. So in January, he has Oliver Dowden says, as party chairman, it was actually quite embarrassing that I hadn't been invited to any of them. Always good. He's got Novak Djokovic, you might remember, in the same year. Meanwhile, I went to Australia and left again. The worst thing was the way people were joking. I was only against the vaccine because of my name. Novak
Djokovic. Yes, indeed, yes.
Even though it is a perfectly normal name in Serbia. And I bet my friend anti-vax, sod off with your vax, and Bill Gates, core blimey, he's got my vax, never had the same problems.
Very good. Yeah, I like it.
Liz Truss in February, he said, listen, boss, one of my top advisors at the Foreign Office told me Russia is a growing threat. Actually, I corrected him. It's pronounced Rishi. All glorious stuff. Wonderful. And they've got Duke of York. He goes on for the whole year, which is rather fun on that sort of level. Duke of York, if you've got time for one of these.
Yeah, go for it.
This was also a month I had to settle out of court with a woman I didn't know. It's so frustrating, I told my lawyer. It's like marching all the way to the top of the hill and then just having to come down again. Very funny, he said. What is, I said. Then Charles told me there was no way I was going to have to be able to keep the royal role. But people are going to forget who I am. Why, in a couple of years, I'll be able to wander into a restaurant on some random high street and nobody will even notice.
Very good.
I thought you already could, said Charles.
Whoops. Very good, yeah. Smoking Pizza Express.
Thank you.
Very, very good indeed, yeah. I mean, Hugo Rifkin's very, very wise man and very, very funny as well. And do you like John le Carré novels, the great crime novelist? Yeah, because there's a great line from Hugo Rifkin where he wrote, I've just looked this up actually, where he talked about John le Carré novels, which everybody says are amazing books, and John le Carré is wonderful and the best crime novelist that Britain has ever produced. I disagree, I don't like his books at all. It says, and Hugo Rifkin was sort of parodying them and said, single bars burning on 3-bar fires, men who are not quite gentlemen turning up a colour against the cold as grey rain falls on grey streets and good people die suddenly and hopelessly for plot reasons you don't quite understand, which really summed it up for me. Andrew Eborn, thank you so much for your paper. Really appreciate that.
This is Talk TV.